I can remember, after the emotionally charged day I had experienced on the Friday, I wanted to have a space between myself and others. It was a day of walking in search of penguins and exploring. It was a day I stood a while at the Liberation Memorial and thought about Doc. I had not trusted myself to visit the Liberation Memorial until that day, and since the pilgrimage I have reflected on what was my reticence. I was wondering whether I was fearful of seeing Doc's name amongst the other fallen members of my Royal Marine family, or whether in some way I had pre-planned in a structureless way my own expression of loss for my friend. I remember on previous days on the pilgrimage when I had walked briskly past the memorial, attempting to ignore its existence, and perhaps once again ignoring any existence of the pain of loss that I felt. This is at odds with my insistence that I had to have a reason for returning on this pilgrimage, a reason beyond the collecting of data for my dissertation. Whilst collecting data was a very important part and an obvious opportunity during the pilgrimage itself was not an academic field trip or a data collecting exercise. I wanted to visit the place I had experienced war, and most importantly, I wanted to say goodbye to Doc. However, as it turned out, the memorial was not the place where I finally found some peace and finally shed some more tears. This happened a couple of days later. That Saturday evening was the first of two parades. This first parade was to celebrate the liberation of the Falkland Islands. We marched like old soldiers do, proudly but ever conscious of the effort to stay in step with the person in front of you. There were photographs, and a group photograph of all the veterans outside Government House. It is interesting that I talk about finding my peace. What does this mean? I'm sitting here working on this research, and as I write about Doc, I think about Doc. My thoughts are only fleeting, but still carry the embodiment of loss, and with this, a twinge of sadness. I feel tearful within that moment, but as always, it passes, and I am drawn back to my writing. However, it is okay to feel pain, because without that embodiment of pain and loss, how can I tell this story as I want it to be told? How can I tell this story as I want it to be heard? After my emotionally charged day yesterday, I decided to be on my own. I went in search of penguins, and I found one. It lived in a hole, a burrow, and perhaps in some symbolic way taking cover in a fortified position from its enemies. I continued my walk to Point Lighthouse, which is about 6 miles from Port Stanley. Time flew as I experienced contrasting sensory encounters with nature, solitude, artifacts of war, and poignant words on memorials. I'm down at the Atlantic Conveyor Memorial, which is mentioned about it being just like Cornwall, and I've already spoke this into the video, but I just think this is it's on the park bench, and it says, "I must go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea and sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by, and the wheels kick and the wind's song and the white sails shaking, and a grey mist on the sea's face and a great dawn breaking." That's an incredibly emotional poem.